and welcome to Technically Speaking, where scientists and engineers come together to chat about a common interest, share knowledge, and satisfy some curiosity. I'm Ellie, and I'm joined by Laura and Antonia to talk about how technology has changed, including particle accelerators we used to have in our homes. So, Laura, you used to work with particle accelerators. What are they doing in our houses?
I used to work in a radiation science laboratory that ended up with two fairly sizable particle accelerators, much bigger than you'd normally fit in your house. And we were using those to look at the effect of radiation on various materials and chemical systems, like all good researchers do. But they work in quite a similar way to the way that old school TVs used to work. And I never really appreciated that until I started working with the research ones.
That's cool. So you mean cathode ray tubes, they're like things in the back of old tellies, this is what you're talking about?
Yeah, we tend to just refer to them as CRTs, for those of us that are old enough.
And Antonia, I know that you haven't worked with particle accelerators, but you have been up to something related.
Yeah, the closest I can say is I've been to CERN, which has the Large Hadron Collider. At the time, it was the largest particle accelerator in the world, and I was just really impressed because there was so much involved engineering, scientists coming together, and it's to understand the fundamentals of the universe. So I was like, yeah, this is pretty cool. I'm glad I came on this school trip.
That's a pretty cool school trip, I think, to go all the way to Switzerland, isn't it? That's what I said.
Yes. And I think the circumference is big enough to actually be like a city.
Wow, that is seriously impressive. So at CERN, they're firing, this is the ultimate particle acceleration, right? They're firing them super fast in a ring, round and round. I think you can probably all tell immediately that I know no idea what particle accelerators are, what they do. So Laura and Antonia are going to teach me some physics. It's particles, right? So let's start with something we know. So how small are we talking here?
So it was called Hadron Collider because that was the type of particles it was accelerating. And they are the things that make up an atom.
Right. With you so far.
The accelerator itself had a circumference of 27 kilometres. And so it would use a bunch of magnets because they're charged particles, and they could speed them up. And then when they got to the speed that they wanted, which was as close to the speed of light as they could, they would collide them. And they got about 1/1,000,000th off the percentage of the speed of light.
The obvious question, or maybe not the obvious question, is why? What for?
For fundamental physics.
For fundamental physics. Okay, Laura, tell me more.
I mean, to be fair, I never worked with the Large Hadron Collider, and I've not visited it, so I assume Antonia does actually know more than I do about that. But they're essentially trying to uncover things like, once we get past atoms, what are those atoms made of and how do those things interact? And I guess what are the forces that help mediate things that go on in the atoms?
That was my understanding.
Oh, good.
Basically, it's to mimic the processes that would have happened during the Big Bang. So how did the universe actually form? And that would have started, supposedly with an explosion of energy. So they have particles doing that.
Hitting into each other, causing all sorts of kerfuffle.
Yeah, and it would generate different particles, like the Higgs boson was discovered in one of the experiments, and that was sort of the aim, because they knew theoretically this should happen, but they didn't have the technology to prove it and then detect it.
Did they ever find the Higgs boson? That's what I remember, because obviously my last name is Higgs, so I got a lot of... that came up multiple times. Whether I was related to that researcher and scientist. But I remember vaguely way back when CERN was first opened or whatever, that was potentially what they were looking for, but whether they found it, I'm not in the physics realm enough to know.
They do a bunch of different things. That's just one of the things they've been doing. They do other stuff that isn't quite as niche, I imagine, because you can do lots of different things with particle accelerators, and I think they have more than one there. Is that right, Antonia?
I think they have different detectors doing different jobs, but ultimately they have... Oh no, they have the big ring, and then they have a smaller one within it, which do different jobs.
Yeah, because I've worked on much smaller versions of these. So there's Diamond Light Source in the UK that starts off with a linear accelerator, accelerating electrons. And then that is then put into the storage ring, similar to what CERN does, I guess. And that just kind of whizzes round and around. And as it goes around in this circle, it gives off X-rays, bremsstrahlung radiation. And you can do lots of different things with those X-rays. They have all these pipes that guide the X-rays, and you can do different things depending on how it's set up. It's quite cool.
That is cool. I didn't know that they were giving off X-rays, and I need to now remember that X-rays are not just used for looking at people's bones. That is but one application. So how do we get from giant whizzy particles going round and round in Switzerland to having a particle accelerator in your house?
So going back to cathode ray tubes, or CRT TVs, so they essentially use the same principle where you've got a charged particle, your electrons. They're in a vacuum in your tube, and you're accelerating them towards a positive charge. And then Antonia said you have magnets that help control where the particle goes. So you basically got two sets of magnets that mean that electron can scan really, really quickly across the TV screen and hit pixels, which activates them and makes them glow, and then you get colour.
That's fun. Oh, I like that a lot.
It's amazing how what I think is quite a complicated piece of technology is like outdated today.
Yeah, like we don't use those anymore, do we? It's all like flat panel liquid crystal things and organic LEDs.
Yeah.
OLEDs, very expensive. Yeah, we bought a new TV about 5 years ago, and we did not buy an OLED because that is a pricey purchase.
But they do take up a lot less space.
That is true. They are flat.
Yeah, you don't need to fit in a glass vacuum behind the screen.
True.
Exactly. It has got me wondering though, because we were talking about when you slow down a particle, it gives off X-rays, whether our old school TVs were giving them off. And I assume not, otherwise we wouldn't have had them. Well, not giving off enough, to cause a problem. But the electrons are still going pretty fast. I looked it up as I was curious about this. It's 15% the speed of light. So it's still no CERN.
Wow.
But in your house, though, that seems very impressive.
Yeah, and when that slows down, when it hits the pixels at the front, it's got to be giving off some sort of energy other than just exciting those pixels. But I didn't really look into it too much beyond that because I was going down weird rabbit holes. I thought, I should stop.
We love a weird rabbit hole.
I'm going to guess that there wasn't enough power to do anything like generate an X-ray or other electromagnetic radiation.
I'm not entirely sure power would make a difference. You've got your electron going at a really fast speed. When it slows down, it gives off an amount of energy. And you could work out what that would correspond to in terms of the spectrum of X-rays, if that is what it's giving off.
Were there loads? This is what I'm imagining, because presumably there were however many pixels on an old TV. You had to have loads of electrons hitting them all at the same time. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to see anything.
Yeah, I think you had one beam of electrons for each of the three different pixel colours. So you just have three beams going continuously and scanning across. I feel like Antonia's looking at what I just said as we're talking now to fact check whether 15% the speed of light is actually fast enough for an electron to go off X-rays.
Well, that was a rabbit hole I wanted to look at, but just to get back into the conversation, I'm not sure it was it three rays that are different? Because I was like, how do they generate the rays?
In the same tube.
Yeah. Or were they sort of like filtered? Or did they have different things that would activate based on the energy, and they were just like different colours? Do you know like how LED TVs have all three colours, but it's just whether they turn on which pixel to give you the colour mix? Yeah, now I have so many things I want to look up about how a CRT works, and no one even uses them anymore.
Yeah, this is why I stopped, because I thought I'm just going to keep going and I'll just lose sight of what I'm trying to achieve here, which is the general understanding.
I guess they were in a vacuum the whole time, so they didn't die. I'm thinking too much like a biologist. I need to think more physics. Because if you put your TV on, then the power in the TV heats up the electrons in the tube, and then they hit the pixels, and then that makes colour. And then if you turn your TV off, then they all just cool down and go back to chilling in the tube.
They would essentially hit phosphors, which would glow.
Right.
And that's how you got the colour.
Okay. But then that wasn't like a one-time use situation. The electrons then stayed in the tube for the next time that you turned your telly on. Or you got more.
Yeah, you produce more every time you turn it on. So I guess
you produced more.
Yeah, if you look at TV programs from the 40s and 50s where they have to wait for it to warm up and the picture to begin to appear on the screen when it was in black and white.
Oh, okay. That makes sense.
So, and I guess you would start off with a source where you need to get the electrons off somehow, which is often by heating.
Yeah, I was going to say, where did they come from?
Yeah, in modern technology, so we have electron microscopes, and they use a beam of electrons rather than light to look at really small things that you can't see with light, because light has too long a wavelength.
Yeah.
They have electron guns that I think are used in some sort of tungsten filament. So you heat the tungsten off, electrons come off it, and you accelerate them towards a charge.
Right.
Or away from a charge.
So there is some sort of source of the electrons that you need in the first place to do whatever you're doing. But that's cool that, there's still tech that uses these principles that's still going on.
Yeah, it's the same for radiation therapy as well. They start off with electrons, smack them into a target, and that gives off X-rays. And then they can use that X-ray beam and do really complicated things with it to direct it at very specific parts of a human body and treat them for cancer.
So radiation therapy is then electrons, is still this principle of focusing a beam of something very small at something else.
Exactly, yeah, and smack them into something.
In this case, a person. Or a tumour.
Eventually.
I wonder if anyone was ever scared of these things, because you mentioned about this X-ray radiation, and people get very confused, I feel, sometimes about radiation, and then that confusion and lack of understanding leads to fear. Were people scared of their tellies?
It's a good question. Although I'm aware of using a CRT TV when I was a kid, but not of any worry about whether it might cause any health problems.
Yeah.
I'm not that old. I don't know if back in the day people were concerned or if they were just so excited to be able to see pictures moving.
Yeah, because I was going to say, where did it started with cinema, right? And then tellies became more and more common, and then we got colour for the Queen's coronation? Or the wedding? Or one of those big...
Coronation, I believe it was, when people started to really get TVs in their houses. But I don't remember people were having a panic, but then I wasn't there exactly.
If you were there and you're listening, let us know if people were panicking.
Yeah, about X-rays specifically, not about the train coming out of the screen.
Well, the thing is, you mentioned trains. I'm pretty sure I'd heard that in the Victorian era, people were actually scared of trains because they were a new technology that went faster than the older technology, so horses.
I understand that, though. That to me makes sense, because they go quite fast. In the Victorian era, they would have been steam-powered, so they would have stunk and had great big plumes of smoke coming out of them. And if you've never seen a train, I can imagine it's quite loud, quite terrifying.
They are. I've experienced them. They come through near me occasionally because we have an historic railway. They are, incredibly loud, painfully loud.
And huge.
Yeah, and they can set things on fire quite easily, which they did a few weeks ago around here when we were in the middle of a drought. But that, I don't think, is what people were scared of. What they were scared of was because it was going so fast, they might age more quickly.
Wow.
And this is what I remember from going to a museum, so I might be misremembering it, to be fair. But doesn't that seem odd that going on a train travelling at 40, 60 miles an hour was scary because you might age?
Yeah, because you're going faster, so therefore it's taking less time. So why would you be aging? That doesn't make any sense, because you've got there quicker. If anything, you should be getting younger.
Yeah, is that how relativity works? Can anyone remember? It is, isn't it? Yeah. Because in Flight of the Navigator, when he went into the future, he was still the same age and all his family had aged.
Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if Victorians were thinking along those lines and going, yeah, relativity, trains, same thing.
I think Victorian times might predate relativity. So it was very much, we have no idea how the world works. So yeah, trains going that fast maybe could be aging people. Or maybe they just got confused with how, centrifugal forces made their skin flap.
Hanging out the edge of the passenger window and getting G-forces and wind straight into your face.
Yeah.
But people are scared of some tech. Even microwaves made people panic initially. But to be fair, they did have a point.
Didn't they end up having to shield them? I don't know the history of this, but they give off waves that can make water boil. So if you're not managing them correctly, I can see how they could be pretty dangerous.
Initially, they didn't have the dotty thing that they have now. I don't know what you'd call that. If you look at a microwave door, it's got a screen of dots.
Yes.
In front of it, and that protects you from the microwaves themselves or a different kind of radiation?
I think it's to protect you from the microwave radiation itself, because it's this is my logic. The holes are smaller than the wavelength, so they can't get out.
Oh, cool. So it's literally trapped.
I think. Logically, I don't think the size of the hole... I think this is a made-up explanation. I think it must be something else. But people have told me that's the reason why it's that size.
You can see those holes, though, and aren't microwaves a smaller wavelength than you can see? They're micron length, aren't they? So, a micrometer hence the name. Am I misremembering that?
Oh.
I feel like we should have done more research before this episode.
There's so many questions that you don't think of necessarily at the time.
It can range from meter to 1 nanometer. Nope, not nanometer. Millimeter. I don't know why I said nano.
Oh, so the whole micron thing is just they're smaller than something that's bigger in that case. Not what I was thinking of the literal micrometer.
No.
Maybe that was done for public opinion rather than necessarily scientific accuracy.
Yeah, but I mean, there was mobile phones as well. People were scared that they would give off radiation that would fry their brains.
I think people are still scared of things like 5G. There's a lot of people campaigning against that.
It's not an argument I've ever listened to, though, because it just sounds like fear-mongering.
I remember not necessarily being told, but being aware when I first got a mobile phone that you shouldn't put it in your pocket, because whatever was coming off the phone in terms of radiation or phone vibes, I suppose, was damaging to your organs, and it would give you cancer of your ovaries or uterus because of having your phone close to your pelvic region. But I don't know where that came from and why people thought that at the time, why I was aware of that.
It sounds like just a general, radiation, it's bad. But radiation is lots of different things. It's the light that we see. It's electromagnetic radiation, right? Which is light. You could be talking about radio waves as well if you wanted, which I assume is how phones used to operate, on radio wave signals.
That's exactly what I was thinking, was people had radio stations and the radio player. What do you call that?
A radio.
A radio.
Radio.
Yeah. And that would be taking radio waves and emitting sound waves to you. So how is that any different if it's in a mobile phone?
Yeah. I think maybe because people don't understand how it works. I couldn't tell you how 5G works, or Wi-Fi in general, other than the fact that if it's on and the light is green, my laptop will connect. That's literally all I need to know.
So I don't understand it, therefore I fear it, is what some people say.
Yes, I think that's probably true.
So what's interesting is because obviously since we first heard that old wives' tale, or whatever you want to call it, about don't putting your phone in your pocket, I decided to look it up. There was an NHS website that explained all the dangers related to mobile phones and the research that have been undertaken. And essentially, the only observable difference they had was it might heat your body up by 0.2 degrees Celsius.
Okay, which presumably you could do more by just being in a warm room.
Or exercising.
Or sitting in the sun.
That seems like a weird thing for our National Health Service to have to explain to people, but I guess there was a reason.
They investigated a lot of different things, and it just had no observable difference except for temperature and the fact that using a mobile phone whilst driving is your biggest danger.
Because it distracts you from the road.
Yes.
Not because it's emitting harmful X, Y, and Z.
Not because it messes with the GPS or anything.
No, or suddenly emitting more radiation because it's in motion and doing things faster.
Oh my god, it can time travel.
Oh, could you imagine if that was a thing?
Oh my word.
You've crossed the streams. They're gonna do something stupid.
Why do you have to turn your phone off on a plane? Does that mess with stuff?
I remember looking at this and there was an incident where lots of people's phones started pinging a cell tower at the same time, and it was on a small aircraft, and it did mess with some navigation system, I think it was.
I think it also causes just more issues for people on the ground.
Right. They just can't be bothered to deal with 300 people on an EasyJet flight to Spain. Ooh, texting their mates.
Well, it will happen as they try and connect to each cell tower as they fly over it.
Right. Because I always wonder if it's just bullshit, or if it's just a thing that they say so that they don't have to deal with loads of people on calls on flights for ages.
No, I think there was an element of truth to it, but I'm not too sure it applies now because all the electrics on planes are insulated. So unless, as Antonia says, cell companies really are bothered about people suddenly pinging a load of towers at the same time.
They even have Wi-Fi on planes now, so presumably we've moved on from that. And I guess we've moved on from a lot of things because we're not scared of our microwaves. We're not scared of our mobile phones. We're not scared of trains, other than the fact that, you could potentially be crushed by one. There's a level crossing near me and you have to stop. Obviously, the barriers come down. You have to wait in the car and then you can go on. And, that is a real fear. Even though I know that I have seen the train pass, at any moment a train could come and crush me as I cross the level crossing in my car.
We have footpaths that go over the train tracks around here, so you have to look very carefully both ways.
But kids these days are never going to experience that. They're not going to be scared of their microwave. We're not scared of our microwave. So what are they going to be scared of in the future? Is it going to be blooming AI or whatever Elon Musk's up to next.
Always be scared of Elon Musk.
I mean, AI does have all sorts of things going on, but maybe the issue that we're worried about isn't AI taking over like Skynet, but maybe just loss of jobs and massive environmental issues from using all the energy for the servers, all that.
Or knowing whether something is really true or not, or is a deep fake.
Oh, yeah.
Oh.
We've come back round to the deep fakes recently.
I did see this completely AI generated video. They interviewed different people on their opinion of a fictional car show. And apart from a few foibles, it was pretty convincing. It looked like random generic public chatting about stuff. And they had accents. They had funny speech patterns that weren't just computer speech patterns, but actually, you know, how people trail off and don't explain themselves fully.
Wow.
It was weird.
That is quite scary, I think. I was thinking more in terms of, like, physical tech. Like a teleportation device. Like, if you're the first person in the Victorian era to see a train and go on a train, I can understand that you would be pretty scared. But if you're the first person testing out a teleportation device, you're going to be legging it to the back of the queue. You know, no one wants to be first, do they?
I guess it would depend what it would be tested on. I mean, you wouldn't just start with humans, would you? You'd build it up.
Yeah, nah, you got to go straight into the deep end, Laura. Didn't they do it in Willy Wonka? What do they start with in Willy Wonka? Like an apple or a piece of candy or something?
Oh yeah, the sort of the Mike TV thing where
Yeah.
he beamed himself onto the TV, but he was tiny
Yes.
and that had to be stretched. Did he turn them into his constituent particles and have a beam of particles going across the room, a la Star Trek?
I don't think Willy Wonka went into that much physics.
That's what I remember from the visualization, but I just think that sounds to me like a really inefficient way because you have to transport those particles and then reconstitute them
Yeah.
and make sure they're exactly the same. So if you were going to do it, you'd use a wormhole or some sort of maybe quantum entanglement.
I like the wormhole idea because I like the idea of like stepping through and like still being me, rather than the like Star Trek beam me into nothing and re-beam me in an alien planet at the other end. Like, would you still be you? Would you, if you've been rebuilt, would everything be where it was when you started?
Like Theseus's ship.
Yeah, and there's a lot of research at the minute into what consciousness actually is, and it involves, from what I'd read, it was something like quantum entanglement of things in your brain. So it's another physics thing.
Oh God, not more physics.
Entanglement in the brain. Wow.
I might be misremembering that again. I am quite tired. But my point is, if you still want to be you at the other end, you also need to replicate that quantum entanglement, which we
Yeah.
don't understand yet.
Maybe we won't try teleporting anyone anytime soon. What about tech that could give you like a skill? What about the other way? Instead of like messing with your own consciousness, you could download something into your brain. That would be quite fun.
Yeah, like, what if VR was so convincing you thought you were there that you've kind of like tricked your brain?
Into believing that you're somewhere else.
Yeah.
That's potentially quite worrying. But I was thinking more like having like a menu of stuff. Let's say I wanted to learn Spanish, and then I like plug my brain into the computer and download Spanish. But then I could like unknowingly give myself some junk or like spam or like a brain virus.
Oh no.
That's what I would be scared of as a consequence.
I feel like that would be painful because your brain has to go through a lot of biological processes to make neurons or whatever it is that encodes having that other language in your brain, right?
Yeah, I guess so. There must be some sort of extra connections that you have to make. Like how do you physically learn at a brain level?
Yeah, so surely rapidly developing all of those memories or whatever you want to call them would involve an awful lot of effort on the part of your body. So it would be painful and tiring.
I hadn't thought of that. I just assumed if we understood the brain structure well enough, we could just apply that knowledge and boom, new skills.
Just restructure someone's brain.
This isn't better than the transportation at this point.
I feel like we're just teleporting bits of someone else's brain into your own brain now.
Ooh.
Oh,
A brain transplant, but in mini bits.
oh dear.
It could be keyhole surgery for the brain. Could you make a new neuron, stick it in the right place, and then I don't know how neurons even work. It's electrical signals though, right?
It all comes back to electrical signals
Tiny particle accelerators in your brain.
in your brain.
I feel like I'm being kind of pessimistic and sort of shooting down all of your fancy ideas for things you want in the future with, yeah, but you need to figure these things out first.
Oh, stop being logical.
Yeah, I suppose this is why we don't know what we fear, because we literally have no idea how we're going to get there.
No, and the thing is, although I've done a lot of research with a lot of really fancy, cool, advanced things, I'm also now going back to nature, so I don't really want a lot of tech in my life. However, I did come across some research from my freelance work where someone wants to give plants their own human-made control systems so they can moderate things like how much water they have and what nutrients they're getting, which will put the plants in control to an extent of their own destiny. They're farmed, so they're still going to get eaten. But until then...
They're not going to do a chicken run.
Wow.
No, but could you imagine?
Yeah, it's going to be Day of the Triffids meets, what's she called, Ginger from Chicken Run. But if they're controlling what? Like, how much water they get? How are they doing that?
It sounds it from the interview that I did. They're using an ion pump, which apparently is specifically designed, and it needs just a very small electrical current to power it. So they came up with this idea of using something called a triboelectric nanogenerator, or an artificial leaf.
That's a great name, though. Well done.
It's a bit of a mouthful, isn't it? So it's an artificial leaf that's attached to the leaf of the plant, and it's made of something that honestly sounds a little bit like a solar panel, but not quite as complicated. And it's got an electrode going into the stem of the plant to harvest charge from it, and the waxy surface of the leaf acts as an insulator. So when wind makes these things blow, they occasionally come into contact with each other, and that generates an alternating current, and that's what drives the ion pump, so they can use it to deliver various different chemicals.
Right.
How does because I'm imagining it's like a plant with a button for call for water or call for fertilizer.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
But how do we know that it's pressing the inverted commas button for water or other things?
And also, if it's wind powered, surely it's like involuntary then, right? So then it's like getting water when it's had enough.
Well, I guess this is like step one of what will probably be quite a long development process. This is just a proof of concept, which they did in the lab using a fan.
Okay. I see.
I imagine the ultimate aim is to couple that with various different sensors that monitor the plant's health. So they're just harvesting power from the plant and combining it with these sensors to give the plant what it needs.
So is that really the plant controlling it? Because it's like, oh, the wind's blown, I'm thirsty.
Yeah, I'm going no. That's just fancy engineering.
Well, it's not as if the plant necessarily knows, but it will still be acting on some sort of signals from the plant, won't it, in order to know that it needs certain nutrients.
Or is it just sensing from around it, but it's not sensing the moisture level within the plant, is it?
But it could sense that if you set it up that way. There was that thing that turned up in the news ages ago that allegedly plants scream.
Oh, I remember that.
Yeah, some scientists had developed something that could sense, was it water moving through the stem, and it sounded differently when the plant was drying out?
Oh.
And when you converted it into an audible sound, it was just deemed as screaming. People got the wrong end of the stick with that one.
Wow.
Similar to trains making you age.
I don't think we need screaming plants. I don't think we need to listen. Maybe let's just let them be. They're doing fine. They've been here millions of years. We should just leave them alone.
Well, if you want to eat, you need something.
Yeah, I'm not saying I don't care for the plants. I'm just saying I'm not sure they are screaming if you've done so many steps to interpret it into screaming. Also,
I'm not sure we need the double leaf plant in control, taking what it needs system. I feel like whatever we've got so far has been working. Maybe we don't need to over-engineer this.
I'm intrigued.
Maybe that's a future episode about global food production or something, because I remember reading when I was looking into what even is meat and looking at corn, that corn was invented in response to a worry in the 70s that we were going to have a global food shortage because populations were increasing.
Oh.
And we just run out of resources. So you need to be more efficient with your resources. So maybe that's where this is going.
Yeah, I am all for having a bit more of a tailored approach rather than just put a bunch of stuff down and hope for the best.
That is my gardening technique.
And I always feel sorry for my plants when they start to look a bit pathetic. I don't know what's wrong with you. But if you could speak, if you could tell me.
If you could tell me, I'll give you some nitrogen, whatever you need. Okay, despite the sorry states of our garden, I think we have covered quite a lot. We started with particle accelerators, both big and small, in your house and in Switzerland. I've attempted to learn some physics today. Thank you, Laura and Antonia. And then we moved on to all sorts of scary things and what tech we're still using and why people would be scared about it in the first place and what even we might be scared of in the future. So if you've enjoyed this episode, stick around and we'll see you in the next one.
The views expressed in this podcast belong entirely to the person that said them. They do not represent any industry or organisation. If you enjoyed listening to these views, it would really help us out if you could rate us, leave a review and tell a friend. This podcast was sponsored by no one, but if you're interested in funding us to continue to have frank discussions about science and engineering, please get in touch.